when all the Zionist Camp people, they went at a possible risk of their life, really. But Joe Smith promised them safety if they obeyed the Lord.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's podcast, and we are so grateful to have my dear friend Eldon Barrowes with us. Eldon, I'll tell you just a little bit about him, but I actually got the opportunity to meet him, and we've had numerous opportunities to trample around the areas of Illinois together and some of the backcountry areas. And I'll tell you the reason why in just a minute. But to start off with, I just want to reiterate this is lesson number 38, and this is sections 102, 103, 104, 105. And we're going to really concentrate primarily on the historical things that were surrounding these revelations. And so, again, we just want you to know, remember we are not trying to replace your gospel doctrine class study. This is to supplement it. So we have additional insights and information, and I'm so excited to have you share some of the research and the things that you've done over the last, how many years?
7 or 8?
7 or 8 years.
Or 9?
Yes, exactly. So this is Dr. actually Eldon Barrowes. He is a dentist, and he has lived in. Tell us just a little bit about yourself first, about where you came from, why you were in Illinois, and where you are now.
Well, when I got done with dental school, my brother said, "Why don't you come and there's a practice available in Nauvoo. Why don't you come and check it out?" So I ended up moving to Nauvoo and buying this dental practice. And then 5 years later, went back and specialized in endodontics, root canals.
Oh, you're the one.
Every stand-up comedian has a joke about root canals.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Then I went to Quincy for 8 years, and got interested in Zionist Camp. Of course, when I was in Nauvoo, I was interested in all different kinds of church history, and then later on, I ended up moving to back to Chicago, then Jacksonville, which is right on the Zionist Camp Trail. And so for 17 years, we did. It was a lot of good church history.
Right, that's where I met you, actually.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I met Rod after we had discovered some things about Zelf Mound, some artifacts and everything. And learned some interesting things about it. And then I met Rod, and we've been working together ever since.
Now, some of you may have heard a word just now that you may not have recognized, and that is this word Zelf. Okay, so so we're going to talk about Zelf here in just a minute, but you'll get to know him pretty well, a little bit more about this individual by the name of Zelf. But section 102. In the Doctrine and Covenants here is talking about the first High Council of the Church. This is in Kirtland in February of 1834, and we weren't going to really cover too much about that particular thing. There was a couple things though that you thought would be appropriate to mention about this.
Why do we have high councils and church courts? And that's because this whole section is about high councils and church courts, and the reason is to protect the innocent, to bring sinners or someone who has transgressed to repentance, and to protect the church's good name. So we don't get dragged through the mud like some other churches.
Well, it's interesting because that's the pattern that even God uses. I mean, he has there's a council of the gods, for example, and there's a council of the president of the church, and the prophet of the church has a council as well. They all have counselors and a council, and I think it's good advice. I think it's a good thing to get multiple perspectives, so one person can't kind of get off track a little bit, and then the others will kind of help to guide them in.
I agree.
So.
Yeah, I sat in on a stake presidency high council court one time, and And it was very fair, and it was very well done, and this person repented. It took him a year, but he repented.
Yeah, and that's always that's really, I think, probably what the overall objective is.
Mm-hmm.
But there's people who don't want to repent, and they just want to continue on. So
Yeah.
it's the state presidents have a tremendous amount of responsibility in this whole thing.
Yeah.
Because even though they have people pro and con and so forth, that for different members of the High Council will argue for the person and or against the person, I guess, if you will, and then but ultimately the state president makes the final decision. So he counsels, but he ultimately has the final say.
Decision. Yeah. It worked well, and I feel like they all made the right decisions when I sat in on this court.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I'm excited about having Eldon come and join us because of the fact that he is an expert on this on Zion's Camp and Zion's Mound, or I should say Zelf's Mound, or well, there's another name for it too, which you'll get into in just a minute.
Yeah.
But this actually goes into section 103 in the Doctrine and Covenants. So it's a revelation given through the prophet Joseph Smith at Kirtland, Ohio, on February 24th. So this is early in the year in 1834. Revelation was received after the arrival in Kirtland, Ohio, of Parley P. Pratt and Lyman White, who had come from Missouri to counsel with the prophet as the relief and restoration of the saints to their lands in Jackson County. So they came basically. Last week we were talking about how the mobbings and so forth were beginning to really start to go there in Missouri, and the Missourians were getting more and more hostile towards the members of the church that had moved out to what they were considered to be Zion, and which is in Jackson County primarily, but also some in Clay County and a couple other counties there in Missouri.
Yeah, Jackson County. Yeah, a lot of them right in Jackson County. Their numbers were ticking up, and it was the local citizens were starting to get a little worried.
Yeah, the Mormons were going to kind of take over their settlements and their towns. There really wasn't much of a town. I mean, Independence was far west. I mean, was a nothing before they started doing that. So these were small little enclaves,
small community, and pretty soon they had 2,000 members, 1,200 to 2,000, somewhere in there.
And they could actually outvote the other people in those counties because they outnumbered the people.
Right, they were starting to.
They were afraid that they were going to vote in our own people.
Their own people.
Yeah.
And which would be anti-slavery.
Yes, which would also be they were definitely not into slavery. So. Yeah. That was a pretty major thing. Last week I mentioned also that that one of the other concerns that they had was that the Mormons seemed to be making inroads or friendships with a lot of the Native Americans, the Indian tribes that were in the area as well.
Right.
And they were afraid that the Mormons and the Indians were going to conspire together to eliminate the Missourians. So that was another thing that became more pronounced later on in the Nauvoo period, but it was still a big deal at this time.
Yeah, they worried about everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Zion's Camp basically was established, and so we're going to talk a little bit about Zion's Camp. So this is verse 30 in section 103. He says, "It is my will that my servant Parley P. Pratt and my servant Lyman White should not return to the land of their brethren until they have obtained companies to go up unto the land of Zion by tens or by 20s or by 50s or by 100, until they have obtained the number of 500 of the strength of my house." And then he says, well, if you can't get 500, then still go at 300. If you can't get 300, well, 200 is okay. And if you can't get 200, well, even 100 is okay.
But you have to have at least.
But you have to at least have 100.
Of the strength of mine house.
The strength that's in verse 34. "But verily I say unto you, a commandment I give unto you, that ye shall not go up unto the land of Zion until you have obtained 100 of the strength of my house to go up with you unto the land of Zion."
Right.
Do you know how many they ended up having on Zion's Camp?
They started out with 120 at Portage, which is close to Kirtland. And then they ended up with 215, something like that.
Yeah, they were kind of gathering people along the way. People were coming in. Yeah.
Parley P. Pratt would go ahead and recruit, and they would. Yeah, they recruited as they went, and they ended up with over 200.
Yeah, this is what you call a grassroots effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They were literally, most of these guys were walking.
Right.
Some of them had horses, but most of these guys were actually just walking.
Most of them were walking because they used the wagons to haul relief supplies to the saints in Missouri.
Yeah.
Clothes. The saints in Missouri driven out of their house. Their cabins and homes were burnt, and they lost clothes and everything. So.
Yeah. And their cattle were driven off and killed and so forth.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then verse 35, he says, "Therefore, as I said unto you, ask and ye shall receive. Pray earnestly that peradventure my servant Joseph Smith Jr. may go with you,"
Mm-hmm.
which he did,
Mm-hmm.
"and provide and preside in the midst of my people and organize my kingdom upon the consecrated land." I love that saying, the consecrated land,
Yeah.
the land of Missouri, "and establish the children of Zion upon the laws and commandments which have been and which shall be given unto you." Do you have anything that you wanted to mention about that?
Well, I just remembered my my great grandmother, Laura. Maybe it was her sister, Laura Clark.
Uh-huh.
Laura Clark said, "You can shoot my animals, but don't shoot my children." She was in that mobbing.
Wow.
Yeah, don't shoot my children.
But
Yeah.
go ahead and shoot the animals.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, and then I can't remember exactly when Governor Boggs actually issued the extermination order. It wasn't until a little bit later after that.
That was that was in 1838.
Yeah, that was later on, but then it made an open season and Mormons could be shot. And that actually continued on until about 8 or 9 years ago when they actually finally rescinded
Mm-hmm.
the extermination order by Governor Boggs, along with a major apology
Mm-hmm.
from the state of Missouri to all members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormons.
Yeah, they finally rescinded that.
So now it's actually illegal to shoot Mormons on sight in Missouri.
Right.
Wow. Well, okay. So we wanted to talk mostly about this Zionist camp. So
I just want one.
yes,
Porter Rockwell was accused of shooting Governor Boggs,
yes,
but
which is part of the reason why he felt that they were trying to assassinate him.
he had to hide and everything, and then they caught him coming back to Nauvoo. But anyway, they said, "Did you shoot Governor Boggs?" And he said, "If I would have shot him, I wouldn't have missed."
He would be dead.
Because the guy who tried to shoot Boggs only glazed him,
Yeah.
injured him.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's interesting because Owen Porter Rockwell was a crack shot. He was basically a sharpshooter.
He was.
And they said one of the famous things was he didn't miss his targets. So
No.
they said, "How do you know it wasn't him that tried to shoot Governor Boggs?" He said, "Because he wouldn't have missed."
I wouldn't have missed.
So anyway, all right. So I want to move actually to a PowerPoint here that we have been blessed with, and so we're going to go ahead and do this here. And so I'm going to have Eldon go ahead and tell us a little bit more about Zelfsmound and Zionist Camp,
Mm-hmm.
and why this is important in church history.
I was living in Quincy, and my bishop Clark Bolton said, "Let's go on a father and son's outing," and he took us over where the Zionist Camp went through there in Pike County, Illinois, and we walked along a little road that Church Hollow, which we thought was the road that they took going west, and we read their journals and everything, and then after that I was kind of hooked.
It kind of gets in your blood, doesn't it?
So I had to find out more about it, and Mel Martin, my friend, he had he had a lot of stuff because he lived in Pike County. He was a dentist there, and so I got everything he had and copied it, made copies, but eventually.
This is all the historical documentation that you're about to show us. Actually, you're going to love this information.
Eventually, I moved back. I moved back to Jacksonville, which is close to Zelfmound, because I got interested in Zelfmound, and I thought I may as well move there as somewhere else. And then we started mapping out the mound and bringing youth groups up and finding out more about it. And so here's an artist's depiction of the mound. Did Zelph live at the time of the Nephites? Well, some people get the Zelph mound story all mixed up. But yes, he lived at the time of the Nephites. Okay.
Well, some people try their darndest to try to make it so that Zelph's mound story is kind of poo-pooed, or in fact, there was a group that actually tried to say, well, there were several different accounts. There was like 8 different accounts, and they don't all exactly match up exactly, and so we just can't rely on any of them. We just throw them all out. Well, if we did that with the first vision, what would happen?
Yeah, there's different accounts of the first vision.
Right. I mean, we're going to throw all the first vision accounts out too, because they don't all match exactly 100%.
So it was. There are some detractors who say Zelph lived hundreds of years later, but having done research on it, he could only have lived when the Nephites were there. Okay, so
and you're going to explain here why in just a minute.
Okay, so this is a picture of an outing on the around hiking around the Zelph Mound Trail. We had a 5-mile trail, and really pretty areas in Illinois, and you can see why people would like to stay there, like the church members. Here's Melvin Martin and Richard Mudd. We formed a Zionist Camp committee, and this is the first time we went up to the mound. It was in the wintertime when you can really see the mound easily. Yeah,
'cause you can't hardly see it because there's so much vegetation and foliage everywhere. You're just like, wow, you can't even see it most of the time in the summertime.
In the summertime. And then the one in front here is Mark Green. He joined our committee. He's a hand surgeon, and we had a lot of good times. This points out that those people who were in Zionist Camp were real serious about things. Wilford Woodruff's neighbor said, "Don't go, you're gonna get killed," and he said, "I'm going." And so all the Zionist Camp people, they went at a possible risk of their life, really. But Joe Smith promised them safety if they obeyed the Lord. So what was said on Zelph Mound was...
Because we have to understand something here, and to make it really clear, and that is that they were going to a very hostile place where people were already burning down homes and pillaging and raping and all this kind of stuff going on. And this group of men were going to basically go and try to put down and quell those hostilities.
Exactly. The Governor Dunklin in Missouri said, "You bring some Mormon men here, and we'll get your Mormons back on their properties," because he knew it was unconstitutional to be driven off your properties. But when the Zionist Camp got closer to Missouri, the fervor was so high, the mobs knowing Joe Smith's army was coming, that and they were it was almost like a civil. The governor could see it's going to be like a civil war, so he backed off from saying that you guys can put your people back in on their homes. And Zionist Camp, when they it was exciting times, but when they got closer and closer in Missouri, the mobs were planning to jump on them, and we'll get to that later.
Yeah, okay,
I think. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're going to talk about that. That was the Fishing River experience
miracle,
we're talking about,
where the Lord fought their battles.
Yep.
Okay, so anyhow, this is Zelph Mound. It's got a lot of trees growing on it. As Zionist Camp march, they had to go through a lot of mud and water and thirst and hunger. It wasn't really easy. And here's the march, 900 to 1,000 miles march, starting in Kirtland and ended up in Liberty, Missouri. Okay. But so this just shows that this is a Zelph Mound. The little arrow on the left is the Zelph Mound covered with trees, and then
that's kind of the ridge there that goes along here. It's a bluff.
It's the bluff.
Okay.
The river bluff, and the Zelf Mound is the top of that bluff, and then the other arrow is where they crossed the river. We call it Phillips Ferry. There was a little thing that would shuttle them over, a couple of wagons at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
using ropes, they basically just had like a raft kind of thing. They would put the wagons on it, they would pull them across, and then they would pull it back, and then pick up more wagons and go back and forth.
Yeah. It was
A ferry.
A ferry,
Yeah.
and it took them all day to get across. Here's another shot of Zelf Mound, and it's really pretty.
So yeah, we probably ought to actually say what this is what the history of the church said about it, and maybe should we
Sure.
read that real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, because many of you probably have this book. This is the Exploring the Book of Mormon in America's Heartland, and actually the photos that are in the book, I actually obtained permission from you.
Some of them.
You took them. So, yeah, some of the pictures. Yeah.
The artifacts.
And so this is on page. Let's see, page 28. And on February 24th, 1834, the Lord commanded the prophet Joseph Smith to organize a group of men to aid the brethren to get Zion and so forth. Anyway, and then on June the 2nd, 1834, while in Zionist Camp, Joseph Smith, along with several other men, crossed the Illinois River. Mm-hmm. And then they camped on the west bank. The following morning, Joseph and some of the brethren visited a prominent mound on top of the bluffs overlooking the Illinois River. Mm-hmm. And this is what the history of the church. Do you want to share that? It's right here.
Oh, okay. His name, history of the church.
First part up here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this is the official version in the church history by Joseph Smith. The visions of the past being opened to my understanding by the Spirit of the Almighty, I discovered that the person whose skeleton was before us was a white Lamanite, a large, thick-set man and a man of God. His name was Zelf. He was a warrior and chieftain under the great prophet Onondagas, who was known from Hill Cumorah or Eastern Sea to the Rocky Mountains. He was killed in a battle by the arrow found among his ribs during the last great struggle with the Lamanites and Nephites. And that's, in History of the Church.
This is volume 2, pages 79 to 80. June 3rd, 1834. Now, there are several things in here that people who are not familiar with this may not know about. For example, he said it was a vision being opened to his understanding by the Spirit of the Almighty. So what was he having here?
Revelation.
That's right. He's having a vision or revelation, right?
Yeah.
And he said the person whose skeleton was before us. So what happened was tell us a little bit about what happened there. So they went up on this bluff, and then what happened? Okay,
so on Monday, they crossed the river, and some of the guys had time on their hands, so they went up and they saw some bone. They saw this mound up on the top of the bluff, and you could see it from down below. And they said, "Let's go check it out." And there was bones strewn around, and they decided to dig down and see if there was something interesting in the mound.
Yeah, and who was there? So Joseph Smith was there.
There was
Brigham Young, Heber C. Kimball.
Mm-hmm, yeah, Wilford Woodruff. Okay. And there was about there were several groups that came up to the mound at different times, but Wilford Woodruff was there.
But Joseph Smith, when he got up there, he said peculiar feelings came into his bosom. He said, and then that's when this vision opened up to him.
Heber C. Kimball also wrote some things about the peculiar sensations and the beautiful scenery. They could look down from. It was pretty. The bluff was no tree. There was no trees on the bluff then. Now there are trees because the Indians would burn them off from time to time. There were Indians living there, and so then Joseph Smith came up the next morning because that was Tuesday morning, and they by that time they had the skeleton unearthed, and Zelf had an arrow in his ribs, and he had his thigh bone was 2 inches longer than Joseph Smith, so he was 6'8" or taller, and since Joseph Smith, Anyway, if you do the math,
we're going to get into that in just a second here.
Okay.
But
anyway, so Joseph Smith had the vision, but he actually prayed when he got back to his wagon. He got in his wagon and prayed. And when he had a little privacy, you might say, just a few moments, and he got this revelation about Zelph, and then he told him about it after that, all the specifics. But Zelph was, he was a warrior, a chieftain. His leg had been broken by one of these slings, stone
From a sling, yeah.
and it had healed. It never been set, and it kind of healed. And he only had one tooth in his head. So
as a dentist, you're thinking, man, I could help this guy.
not much we could do now.
You think of the pain that people must have gone through back then when they didn't have any way to do it. The only thing they could really do is just knock out the tooth or just break it off or pull it somehow.
It'd be tough, yeah. Tough.
And this guy only had one tooth left.
And,
wow.
Yeah. But anyway, Zelph, he was killed by... it's a pretty good sized arrowhead, which do you want to show it to him now?
Yeah, so
Okay.
essentially, we're going to get into a little bit more of the history part of it here. And if you want to see a picture of that, you can actually see that here in this. This is a picture of one that I was actually given by a friend of mine. And that's Charles Allen. He's the guy that actually handmade all the windows and doors for the Nauvoo Temple restoration project. But and we're going to talk about James Bradley and so forth in a minute. But James Bradley was able to get access. Well, tell us. Okay, we need to get this a little more organized. So they went up there. They found this. They found the skeleton of this guy, and then as they were digging it out, they found this arrowhead. But it's not technically an arrowhead. It's actually a much larger. It's an atlatl point. We'll get into that in just a minute here too. But basically, so. Joseph Smith said that this was the arrow that actually produced his death, that actually caused Zelph to die. And then later on, what happened to that arrowhead? So the arrowhead was taken, by the brethren, and then what happened to it?
Okay, it was taken by
the Barrowes, I think.
Barrowes.
Yeah.
And then it ended up in Brigham Young's hands.
Yeah.
And then he eventually gave it
out in Salt Lake City.
In Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And then from there he passed it on to Wilfred Woodruff, who had it for a while. Then he passed it on to Joseph S. Smith. It ended up in the Joseph S. Smith collection. And when in 1974, James Bradley, who's the author of this book,
which is kind of this is the
best.
Yeah, it's the most complete, the most comprehensive treatise on on Zionist Camp. It's called The Eternal Perspective of Zionist Camp. Dr. James Bradley. He actually was at Utah State University and worked in the institute there for many years.
He worked on this for quite a while, and this is the best book on Zionist Camp. Anyway, where were we? Oh, he took the picture. He took the picture of the arrowhead. Yeah,
they let him take pictures of the actual arrowhead, and he put it against. I think we're going to show you that too in a minute. That's why we're getting kind of ahead of ourselves. We got pictures of all this stuff here, but we wanted to kind of let you know this is what was going on. So anyway, so my friend Charles Allen took the pictures and so forth, and he took it to a flint knapper, which is a person who makes flint arrowheads and so forth, up in Chicago, and had them say, can you make a replica of this arrowhead? Well, what's it made out of? Well, it was made out of black Yellowstone obsidian. And said, okay.
Actually, Rod took it from the church archives, but
yeah, don't tell anybody.
Just kidding.
So he had 3 of these replicas made. They're within about a 1/16 of an inch of any direction and size and so forth. But this is the arrowhead here. You can kind of see that right there.
Like you said, it's made out of obsidian.
And it's big. It's very big. It's not an arrow. If you just had a regular bow, it would just drop like a rock because it's so heavy.
Right.
These are an atlatl, which is a 6-foot long kind of a spear type weapon that they would put on the end of it. It was actually projected by having another stick about 1.5 to 2 feet long with a little knock on the end of it, a little toe basically, and that would go in the end of the spear, which would have a hollowed out area there. Then you'd hold it like this with the knock, and in fact, check this out. I just happen to have one of those right here. So this is a addle right here.
Wow, that's a long one.
And yeah, so this is the real. Well, this isn't. Okay, let me get that out here. It's so tall, it's hitting the ceiling. Okay. All right, this is the real deal here. Whoa, look at how long this thing is. So that's about a 6-footer.
Wow.
So you can hopefully you can see this. If I keep going this way, you can see the end of it here. And then you take this in your hand here on this end here, and then you can see on the tip of this thing right here, there's an end that has kind of a little edge on it, a little tip on it, and that fits into the back of this right here. Let's see if you can move this back even this way a little bit more farther. So, and then that hooks into here. Then you cock this thing back, you hang on to it with your fingers here, reach forward to the front of it here, and then you can actually hold this weapon. And then when you do it, you cast it. So you actually take this and you let go of you move it forward and you let go of it, and then you use this to drive that arrow even harder and faster. The conquistadors, when they first came out, even with their metal breastplates and so forth, their metal armor, these would just go right through them, just slice right through it. They were so powerful.
Yeah, you can with the leverage, you can get these things going 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, yep. And they actually have contests back east where they actually have this addle throwing contest, and I've seen them hit a target at about 50 yards, just consistently right in the center of the target, just boom, 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 every time. All right, anyway, enough about that.
in Idaho, they have a state park near Melba, Idaho, where you can, an Indian site where they have petroglyphs and where you can throw these addles at some targets. Yeah.
And if you ever actually get to Fort Ancient in Ohio, they have the place there too. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, so
so who was Zelph?
Zelph, okay, a white Lamanite. Now, either his skin was white or he was enlightened. There's two different definitions of white. But he was a white Lamanite. In other words, a converted Lamanite.
By the way, this isn't him.
This is not Zelph, but it gives you some idea what it might have been like.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, he was. Zelph was.
He's a large. He said he was a thick-set man. He was a man of God, and he served under a prophet by the name of Onondagas. And this Onondagas was known from the Hill Cumorah or Eastern Sea. They related those two together: the Hill Cumorah and the Eastern Sea, which is Lake Ontario, and the Rocky Mountains was the other on the west.
Right. Yeah. So Onondagas was the prophet over this large area, prophet and king, and he was a good man. And so Zelph was fighting under the leadership of Onondagas, which means he had to be fighting with the Nephites.
Yeah, but he wasn't mentioned. Onondagas nor Zelph was mentioned actually in the Book of Mormon itself proper.
Because the Book of Mormon doesn't tell 100th part.
Yes, exactly.
Of their history.
Exactly. So, then we know that Joseph Smith had this revelation. He was there on the or in the vicinity basically of when this was happening on Zionist Camp. And this is a depiction of that, showing them digging up the bones of Zelph. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, they kept the thigh bones in Wilford Woodruff's wagon, and took him to Missouri and reburied him.
Because they were falling apart.
Yeah,
partially. Yeah,
they were remarkably well preserved, though, because it was right up close to the surface of the ground. And it was under the type of dirt they call loess, which is a kind of from glaciers, and it preserves things pretty well. So Zelph was pretty well preserved, but yeah, they reburied the leg bones and then kept the arrowhead.
Okay.
It's in the church archives.
Go ahead.
Okay, here's an artist depiction of Zelph by the artist Ken Corbett, and then behind him you see Onondagas, the prophet. And so Zelph was a man of God, and here's the area that Onondagas ruled over, which is basically 2/3 of the continent.
From the Hill Cumorah Eastern Sea to the Rocky Mountains. I mean,
Right.
that's where it is, right there. Yeah.
And so there was a trade network here too. But here's Onondagas, and it doesn't mention him in the Book of Mormon, but yeah, he was the king and the prophet over this area. And then Joseph Smith wrote a letter to Emma the next day and talked to her about how he was wandering over the plains of the Nephites and roving over the mounds of that once beloved people of the Lord.
Can I just read that?
Yeah,
That is such a powerful account here.
Yeah, this is probably one of the best accounts there is.
Okay.
It's in the
He said, the whole of our journey in the midst of so large a company of social, honest, and sincere men, wandering over the plains of the Nephites, recounting occasionally the history of the Book of Mormon, roving over the mounds of that once beloved people of the Lord, picking up their skulls and their bones as what? As proof of its divine authenticity, and gazing upon a country, the fertility, the splendor, and the goodness so indescribable, all serves to pass away time unnoticed. That was a personally signed letter from Joseph Smith to Emma. Yes.
In the RLDS archives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that was a great one of the accounts. Wilford Woodruff mentioned some things about it. He talked about some of the high points of Joseph Smith, what he said about the mound from his revelation, and.
While on a journey, we visited many mounds.
Mm-hmm.
Many mounds.
Many mounds. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Joseph Smith had a vision about the person on earth, and he carried the thigh bone in his wagon. Now here's a youth conference where Bishop Atkins was showing these youth a carving that he made of the same size as the thigh bone that was from the mound.
That's pretty cool. You agree? You know, oftentimes Eldon would bring this wooden, replica bone, and I'm pretty tall. Those of you who know me, I'm like 6'4", and it's longer than my thigh bone. So this guy was a big guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bishop Atkins was about your size too.
Yeah, you can see he's a pretty good sized guy there.
Okay. So here's Heber C. Kimball talked about how beautiful the scenery was, and how high the mound was, and the Zelph was killed in battle among the destructions among the Lamanites. Okay, and then about the Joseph Smith's vision, and then here's he said you could see all over the place, and this is an 1880 photo.
Today you can't. Yeah.
No, you can't. Today you can see, on the one side you can see the trees that have grown over the mound, but on the other side is the 1880 photo of the same view almost, and it showed that in 1880 there was no trees on the mound, and so that's why they could see so far, but things have changed, and here's a view of the thigh bone. Moses Martin said it was 2 inches longer than Joseph Smith's, and which would make him, Joseph Smith being 6 feet or more, between 6 and 6'3", people have said.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yes, there we go. Awesome.
Yeah, and then
that's the thigh bone right there.
Thigh bone there. This isn't the actual thigh bone, but it's
yep.
It's something to remind you of it. Okay, and then Levi Hancock had a lot of interesting things to say. He wrote very detailed journals, and he said that the mound was a mile below the river crossing, where they crossed the ferry boat. And then I saw some bones with a broken arrow. He didn't go up to the mound, but he heard Joseph Smith telling Sylvester Smith all about it. Sylvester was a troublemaker.
Yeah, he was.
And so Joseph Smith wanted to be sure he understood about it. But Zelph fought, he said, Joseph Smith said that Zelph fought with the people of Onondagas for freedom. This land was called the Land of Desolation. So he had a very detailed version. Here's the arrowhead that
there's that picture that we were talking about earlier that James Bradley got. So this is the actual arrowhead, a photograph of it. against a ruler. So if you take a look at that, and then you take a look at this arrowhead, you can see it's very similar.
Yeah. Okay, so here's Rod's the one that he just showed you, the obsidian replica. Reuben McBride talked about some of those important points. The curse was taken off of Zelph. He was a white Lamanite. Reuben McBride was a faithful member all his life. And here's George A. Smith talked about exactly where they crossed the river. He kept a journal, and how they camped on the west side. So we know exactly where the mound is from these journals.
Yeah,
let's see, okay. Phillips Ferry was where they crossed. This is a picture of the river in blue, where they crossed in that pink line up on the top, and there's a little rectangle where they camped, and then the other rectangle is the Zelph Mound down below. It's about a mile below the crossing. Okay, now after the Zelph Mound, everyone was too busy to think about things like the Zelph Mound, because they were all trying to head west and settle in a new land, a Great Basin, and so.
Plus, they had bigger fish to fry.
Bigger fish to
so to speak.
Yeah, and so no one even thought about the mound for another 100 years, and then people started reading the old accounts and said, "Where is that mound?" And so, incidentally, this amateur archaeologist named who after the Mormons left, John Henderson, he dug up some things in mounds across the river from Zelph Mound, and he mapped up Zelph Mound. It's number 8 on this map, but and he's the one that took that picture with the mound with no trees on it. But anyway, he didn't know about the Mormons, but he just noticed it was a big mound.
Now look at all the mounds in that area there. Old Indian graveyard, and each one of those numbers is a mound, a mound of some sort. So this is number 8 is just south of Valley City.
Yeah. He was impressed with the mound, but he didn't dig in it. He only dug in to the ones over on Naples across the river, which he called Naples Mounds. Okay, so, and here's some things he dug out of. Well, this eagle pipe came out of Zelph Mound. It's someone, a local person, kind of found it. From Griggsville, he dug into it and found that eagle pipe. It's a smoking pipe, and
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then you can see
if those of you who've been following our research for a while, you know that these kind of platform pipes like that with the curved base and then with an animal effigy of some sort on it is indicative specifically of the Hopewell mound builder people. They're the only ones that did these kind of pipes.
More advanced than the American Indians. The American Indians didn't have anything that's fancy or artistic. And there's a picture, a diagram that Henderson made of Zelph Mound. Zelph Mound's also called Naples Russell Mound number 8 by archaeologists. Okay, so here's a photograph compared to the sketch that Henderson made. You can see that the mound...
It's pretty similar to it, yeah. Although it's been excavated. Some portions of it have been excavated.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, this is James Bradley, who wrote the book on Zionist Camp, his daughter Kay Starr, and then Melvin Martin on the left, who was a dentist who kept track of church history until others came into the area. Good friend of mine, actually. And then this shows that there was no 4-lane highways in west central Illinois. And there was a big city there, Quincy, and they wanted a 4-lane highway. So when they finally got people working on it, they aimed that 4-lane highway right next to Zelph Mound. Zelph Mound is this river crossing, right? It's that little black spot in the middle, and they were only a couple of about 300 feet from that mound on that highway. And then Orrin Hatch wrote a letter and said, "Hey, Zelph Mound is an important church history site," and they moved the highway.
About what? About a mile?
About 2/3 of a mile to the south.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good that they didn't actually do that. That might have been
Yeah.
That it's been preserved.
Right.
Yeah.
They would have might have torn it up a little.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then here's James Bradley. When he first discovered Zelf Mound, he first located the mound. He looked for it for 25 years and finally found it with the help of a local historian and an archaeologist. Now this shows the person facing you is Warren Winston. He was a local historian. He was very impressed about the mound, but he's not a member of the church. And anyway, he was one of them that helped identify the mound.
Yeah.
That shows the mound from the freeway bridge. It's just a bump on the horizon because it's the top. It's the top of the bluff.
Mm-hmm.
It's the highest point around, actually. Okay, and then here's another view of the mound like before, where you can see it better in the winter time.
Okay.
This is a Boy Scout who, in my troop, who wanted to do an eagle project, and so we said, well, make a sign for the mound,
Mm-hmm.
and then with a little thing so people can find the mound. So as he started, he did that, and as he started working on it, we thought, oh, we better make sure this is the right mound. Has anyone dug? I asked the ranger in this picture here, in the dark blue pants. I says, has anyone ever dug into this mound to say when it was? Because we know what Joseph Smith says about the mound. Before we say this is Elf Mound, we better find out about this. So the ranger said, oh yeah, they dug into it in 1990 when they built that freeway bridge across the river, and the artifacts are over in Springfield, and it was supervised by the University of Illinois, and they spent a whole year there. And I said, well, okay, I will check into this. So
that's awesome.
So we. So the questions are, is the mound of the correct date?
So you went over there.
Yes.
And you actually
I went over there and
got to see the artifacts.
Right. I called up the guy who oversaw the dig of the Zelf Mound. His name is what is his name? Anyway, I forgot.
He who shall remain anonymous.
I'll think of it in a minute. But anyway. Yeah. He oversaw the mound dig, and he said, "Why don't you go over to this warehouse where they have all these artifacts, and tell them I sent you, and they'll show you the artifacts out of the mound." Because he knew we were very interested, and he knew. He was trying to write a book about his excavation of the mound at the time, and I sort of helped him identify.
Which has now been published, right?
It's now published. Yeah. I helped him understand what a lamanite was and so forth, and a white lamanite. But anyway, what was the geographic area at the time of Zelf? What was the age? How does the mound relate to all those things? Because there's six different time periods. They all had mounds of some sort, and Joseph Smith had one.
Here in North America,
In North America. Joseph Smith had 1 out of 6 chance of getting it right, if he was just guessing. Okay. So when they dug into the mound, they found out it was from the Middle Woodland period, and it was a Hopewell mound, and which matches up to the final battles between the Nephites and Lamanites. So Joseph Smith got that part right. And then, was there an organized government there? There's tons of archaeological digs that have been done in eastern 2/3 of the United States, and in this Illinois River Valley, and there was a big trade network going on in the same area that Zelf ruled over.
And this is in the Book of Mormon timeframes too.
In the Book of Mormon timeframes,
right.
Yeah, and a big trade network where they traded their stuff back and forth, and after 400 AD, this trade network went very down, almost to zero. But there was still some trade going on, but with all the tribes fighting against each other, not too much trade going on.
Pretty much ended,
Yeah. So that kind of bears witness that there was an organized government, just like Joseph Smith said.
But how do we know that they were all over the place here? So let's go on.
That's a good
about
question.
some of the next things here.
This is where they dug into the mound. There's about 5 test trenches, six trenches, and here's another side view. And they dug. They wanted to find out if everyone was as big as Zelf, and they knew by now they knew this was the Mormon mound, and so because James Bradley and some others, but they knew it was the Mormon mound. They wanted to see if everyone was as big as Zelf, and they dug into it, and the state paid for it. So the church didn't have to put any out a single cent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's an effigy pipe, as Rod said. It has a curved base, and you put the tobacco in the top, and then you put it on a stick, and then the toad looks at you in the face as you smoke. But the word of wisdom wasn't a big deal then, because they didn't have conspiring men who produced tons and tons of tobacco. It was hard to come by. Yeah. Okay, so that was a toad pipe. Here's 3 copper axe heads, but they call them adze, because they turn them like a hoe, and you could hollow out a log or use it to whatever you want to do with like a hoe.
But these are solid copper.
Solid copper.
Yeah.
And the copper was mined from the Great Lakes.
So it wasn't coming from Illinois.
Right.
It was clear up in the Great Lakes area.
Which is the trade network.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this is how we know that there was a large, kind of centralized trade network. That means that these people were highly organized. They had some kind of affiliation with each other. Probably, obviously we believe it was religious, and so forth, that they would do these things. So yeah.
Yeah, the trade network was called the Hopewell Interaction Sphere. All the archaeologists know all about it. They don't admit the Book of Mormon is true, but they carry one in their back pocket, I'm told.
I haven't personally seen that, but nevertheless. Okay. Anyway, so, all right.
This is Rod Meldrum's one of his bus groups, and so every 3-4 times a year, Rod Meldrum has been bringing bus loads of enthusiasts, and they come to see the mound. We have a good time talking about it, and here's another one with Rod Meldrum, and then Ryan Nelson on his left, and then Richard Mudd in the middle, who's a good friend of mine who was on the Zionist Camp committee, and then I'm on the right. But anyway, this is, and we're right in front of the mound. Actually, we're between the 2 tops of the mound. There's 2 tops to it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then here's another group, even bigger group, and see, they're all having a great time.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a hike up there. So this is not usually many times the entire group doesn't go up, but but most of them give it a shot. So
right.
Actually in front of the mound there. But this was a great group here.
Some people, it's a 400 yards and a 200-foot climb, so some people don't make it up there. Over here on the very right is Jonathan.
Jonathan Neville?
Yeah, Neville.
Yep.
Yeah.
Keep going, and let's see.
Okay, here's Wayne. On the left is Wayne May. He's an amateur archaeologist, but he publishes everything the archaeologists don't dare publish, like that relates to the Book of Mormon. He's a good one. Yeah. And then there's Richard Mudd and some people, friends of James Bradley, who came to see us.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is a bowl. A bowl with a water bird. It's actually an abstract design. These people in the time of the Hopewells had time in their hands to make fancy artwork. This is and this is the Hopewells is from 50 or 100 BC to 250 or actually 500
AD.
So,
yeah.
400 or 500 AD. It's the Book of Mormon. We know it's 421.
But 421 exactly.
But
it's amazing. It lines up almost. I mean, pretty much exactly. It's awesome. Yeah.
It does line up. And so these are Nephite. This is Nephite stuff.
Yep.
By the way, this is all from the University of Illinois. This is from Illinois State Museum, and they like want me to recognize that. because they let us take all these pictures. This is another bowl that was from the bottom of the mound, and of course the weight of the dirt crushes these things, but it's a burnished bowl with a water plant design. These are beads. Some of them are from Gulf of Mexico, which is back to that trade network, and some of them are mussel shells.
Extensive trade network, yeah.
Extensive. Okay, this is the guy that showed us the artifacts in the middle, and he's a zooarchaeologist, so he can tell you that what kind of all about the animals that are unearthed in these things. And then this is some of the things that he showed us. A bear canine, they'd wear those on necklaces.
So this is during the excavations of Zelf's Mound. Yeah.
Yeah, this is all
specifically.
This is all from the Zelf Mound excavation.
Yeah.
While they excavated the mound, they had a guard on there day and night, sleeping in a tent even, and for about a year. So.
Wow.
So
keep people from stealing stuff from this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they would put any artifacts into the lockbox in Griggsville Bank. So.
Nice.
Okay, so this mussel shell here is a two-headed duck, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. Okay, and here's once again the toad pipe.
Which is indicative of the Hopewell mound builder people.
Right,
yeah.
Right. Yeah, the American Indians didn't have any of these fancy effigy pipes.
Just kind of pipes, yeah.
Yeah, they just didn't have
lost
any.
the technology by later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and after the Nephites were gone, they just didn't even produce any that I know of. Okay, so here's the copper axe heads again. The American Indians did not have copper axe heads, but they had a few trinkets of copper, but not much. Okay, here's the Hopewell interaction sphere coming up next, which shows where all the Nephites were trading back and forth. This basically shows where the Nephites lived and traded, and
they were all over the interior of America, the heartland of America.
All over the heartland.
Which is the reason why we call this the heartland geography model, because it's in the heartland of America. So
heartland, yeah. And it
easiest way to describe it.
And there's still some more even west of this, but this is the main group. Okay, this is my book about Zelf Mound. And
can I show it real quick?
Oh,
you got a copy of it right here. So
yeah,
I got my copies up here.
Yeah.
There we go. It's right there, and Joseph Smith's revelation about Zelf's Mound. It's actually a fairly good-sized publication. Quite a lot of information in here. So,
yeah, I demonstrated in this book that Zelf lived at the time of Nephites, and that it's all legit. Some people try to make fun of light of this revelation of Joseph Smith, but it's all proven. It's all proven by tons of things, tons of facts, and yeah. Okay, so let's go to.
So let's go back to this this waterbird design here. So interesting.
This is a mussel shell, a two-headed water bird.
Where does the mussel shell come from?
This mussel shell species only grows in Georgia. This. So
it's not from Illinois either.
No. So this is once again these things shipped around in this trade network, so let's go to that. This is in Ken Farnsworth. That's the guy that oversaw the dig.
Okay.
Ken, Yep. In his book, an artist has cleared up this design from the mussel shell, and there it is right there. They made it easier to see, and you can see the two-headed water bird, and kind of it's an abstract design. So
it kind of does look like a flamingo or a duck or something possibly.
Yeah, it's really not a duck, but I sometimes call it a duck because it's easy to remember. But it's a water bird. Okay, so I had the non-Mormon paint a picture of Zelf Mound featuring all the symbols and some of the designs off the pottery, and she put this two-headed duck upside down, and so I thought that irritates me, but I can't do anything about it. because it's already done. She spent a lot of time on this.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a... Well, anyway, I brought a friend in who was in my scout district. He would help me with my scout troop. And I said, I did a root canal for him, and he came to... I said, let me show you this stuff downstairs about the Zelf Mound and everything. Let me show you my museum. And so he looked at that and he said, well, that looks like a person with a halo around their head. And then people kneeling there to him. And I said, holy cow, you're right. I said, I have not...
It sure does.
I've always been looking at
Looks
it as a two-headed duck, and now I says, you are absolutely right. That's a picture. That's Third Nephi. Okay, so now here it is with upright. Now you can see it even a little bit, but it even makes more sense this way than as a two-headed duck. But now, and then if you look at these side by side. Archaeologists never find anything about the Book of Mormon in mounds, just because they don't recognize it when they see it, and so they always call this a two-headed duck a two-headed water bird motif, but they never really they wouldn't know what to do with the other one. But if you look closer at this illustration, the two holes above Christ's head
on the right hand side here,
on the right hand side. The two holes are the string that they would put through this. This is a mussel shell pendant.
So they put a lanyard through there. And
yeah. So the leader, the important person this was buried with, wore it with Christ's head up.
Yeah, because if it was hanging, it would be hanging from those two holes on the right hand side there, and so it would literally be hanging down onto their chest essentially, and it would have it would be upside down from the duck design.
You're right, and so the archaeologists couldn't explain that one either, but we can. Okay, so of course I've showed this people and they said, "Oh, Third Nephi." So it's
interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Joseph Smith testified it was a Nephite mound, and it was.
Yes.
It's in the right time frame according to mainstream archaeologists.
Right. Joseph Smith testified.
And the right kind of artifacts and everything of the Hopewell mound builder people. So that's awesome.
It is a Nephite mound. He testified to that, and then now the mound testifies not only of Joseph Smith getting all the facts right, but of Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so then you see here. Here we go. There's a picture of Hill Cumorah and Zelf Mound. So Zelf Mound is the second most important site that we can relate to the Book of Mormon times that we have in North America,
In fact, oftentimes when we've done our tours and so forth together, I'll mention the fact that there's only 5 places where we know that church history and Book of Mormon history intersect each other.
Right.
And one of those 5 places, well, we have the Hill Cumorah, because the gold plates were there. Okay. And we have the Nephite altar at Adamondiaman. That's another place because there was Nephites there building an altar, and Joseph Smith was there. And then we have basically out here in the west, we have where Manti and St. George temples, where Moroni came out later on apparently and dedicated those 2 places. But the last place is Zelf's Mound, a place where Nephites actually fought and died and were buried there, and then Joseph Smith came in, and so you have another intersection between church history and Book of Mormon history, which I think is really significant.
Right.
I love that fact.
Yes. And so, there's, like I said, there's all these 5 places, and this one, Hill Cumorah is well documented, and Zelf Mound is well documented by 7 different accounts. So, okay, so that's, yes, one more thing. The evidence of the Book of Mormon are solid, but the best way to get a testimony is to read the book and get a testimony of its truthfulness by reading it and praying about it. This is, Gordon B. Hinckley's statement, so all these evidences are good because we just soon investigate it and have all these things that support it instead of having some antis make us wonder what, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to have all our facts lined up that support the Book of Mormon.
Well, would you mind just for the last minute or so here, just to just share a little bit of your testimony of the Book of Mormon and the and church history here in Zelph's Mound?
Oh, sure. When I moved to Jacksonville and we started mapping out Zelph Mound, I just had a special feeling that this is an honor. I'm getting emotional. This is an honor to be involved with this, because this is an important church history site and Book of Mormon site. So, yeah, and of course I've always had a testimony of the Book of Mormon, and everything matches up. You know, I never doubt Joseph Smith or the Book of Mormon. You know, if so, yeah.
That is fantastic.
Yeah. That's my testimony of Jesus Christ.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and hopefully this has been enlightening. Some of the things that were happening here. Now, we didn't cover the fishing river part, though. No. But do you want to cover that real quickly? Yeah, real quick. Okay. I'll pull that up here in just a second. Here.
All right. Anyway, the mob violence drove the Jackson County saints off of their homes, and Party P. Pratt and Lyman White rode horseback all the way to Kirtland, Ohio, to tell the prophet about the problem, and he received a revelation, section 103, that said the saints were scattered because they need to hearken to the precepts and commandments of the Lord, and
instead of man,
instead of
trust the Lord.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so that was the reason we had that they'd been scattered and driven from Jackson County, which is a consecrated ground. Okay. The redemption of Zion, you know, Zionist Camp thought, well, we're going to get these people back on their properties. They were all armed. Everyone had a rifle. Of course, you know, you do that for protection too. But there was, 100 of them to start with and 200 to finish, and they were all armed, and the Missourians, the closer they got to Jackson County, the more excited the mobs got, and they were going to do in old Joe Smith's army. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so let's see, what do we got next here?
So they're just helping. We kind of covered most of this, but some of the things that we didn't cover basically is that they walked at 35 miles a day. 35 miles a day. On an average. Yeah, on average. That's a lot of miles.
It is. Yeah. With only one pair of shoes. They had blisters and everything. And, yeah. Sometimes they'd run a little short of food and a little short of water, and they went through all those hardships together. Okay, let's keep going here. And then, so Zionist Camp thought, you know, we're going to get those people back on their properties. That was the redemption. In their mind, that was redemption of Zion. Mm-hmm. They passed several mounds. This was the Enon Mound, which Joseph Smith, when they passed that mound, he said, there's wicked people buried here, and there's been a lot of people killed here. And a prophet's spirit sink when he gets where a lot of people have been killed. And later on, we found out that was a Jaredite mound. Mm-hmm. And
it's still there today.
Still there today in Enon, Ohio.
Enon, Ohio. Yep.
Yep. Okay. This shows where they camped. You think they would camp close to water, but they didn't want anyone ambushing them from the trees. So they camped way up on the high bluff, and then
on the grass, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Away from the water. You know, everyone grumbled, "Now we gotta water our animals," and so forth. But that's where they camped, to Joseph Smith's orders. And then this shows the church they went into.
This is the cover of the Eternal Perspective of the Zionist Camp by James Bradley. We were talking about this. Is his cover art.
It's his cover.
I think it was Al Rounds may have been the artist that did this. It looks like his work, but anyway.
Anyway, this big storm came up the night that the mobsters rode into camp and said, "We're going to do you guys in before morning," because they had cannons and everything. Mm-hmm. And after the mobsters rode out, a storm blew up, and it rained and lightning and wind on the Zionist Camp.
Hail.
But on the mobsters, there was hailstones that were so big that they would cut off the leaves out of the trees. and their horses would bolt. All the mobsters just tried to find holes in logs and anything they could to get out of the hailstorm, and in the morning, after being pelted all night, and of course it stopped any gunpowder from being wet. And in the next morning, the mobsters said, "Well, if this is the way the Lord's going to fight for the Mormon army, we just as well go about our business."
Yep. So that was so this is a fishing river. They said that the water rose 40 feet that night.
In that night because of that storm.
Yep. And then you have the Zionist Camp basically talking about that, and this is the image showing the battle of Fishing River.
Yeah, it shows the horses, and there was one guy who lost his hand trying to hold on to his horse through a fence, and horses they didn't like the hail either, and it pretty well it stopped everything. The Mormons didn't get there was not a shot fired after them, a couple of cannon balls, and then after that nothing.
Wow. So this is basically, to me, this is an example of how the Lord actually fights the battles for His people. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to share one last thing here. Yes. Yeah. So this is actually from Elder David A. Bednar in the July 2017 Ensign in regard to, on the Lord's side, lessons from Zionist Camp. Mm-hmm. He said, because of the failure to reestablish the saints on their lands in Jackson County, Zionist Camp was considered by some an unsuccessful and unprofitable endeavor. A brother in Kirtland, one who lacked the faith to volunteer to go with the camp, met Brigham Young on his return from Missouri, and he asked, "Well, what did you gain on this useless journey to Missouri with Joseph Smith?" Brigham Young's response? "All we went for." Promptly replied Brigham Young, "I would not exchange the experience I gained in that expedition for all the wealth of
Gagia County." Gaga County, I guess.
Yeah, it's Gagia County.
Yeah.
And then he says, "As individuals and families, we too will be tested, sifted, and prepared, as were members of Zionist Camp. The scriptures and the teachings of the brethren are replete with promises that faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, the making, honoring, and remembering of sacred covenants, and obedience to God's commandments will strengthen us to prepare for, to face, to overcome, and to learn from the trials and the tests of mortality."
Yeah.
And I love that. In fact, one of my favorite sayings here is, if God is all you have, then you have all you need.
Yeah.
And Zionist Camp was an amazing testing place. One of the things that you mentioned to me before is that many of the leaders of the church for years afterwards would be those who were actually there with Joseph, shoulder to shoulder with him on Zionist Camp.
Exactly. All the guys, a lot of the people that led the Mormon pioneers west to Utah or to Great Basin were trained in Zionist Camp. At least half of them. Yep.
All right, well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. Sorry we went a bit long, but we hope you're enjoying these podcasts. If you are, give us a thumbs up and like us and subscribe to our channel, etc. We are excited. Thank you so much, Eldon, for coming out and
my privilege.
And do it. You know, when you hit Zelf and Eldon, I come with Zeldin. But
I've always been self-motivated.
You've been a highly self-motivated person. Yes, that's right. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. And we'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us. And see you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.